Okay, sorry. I just love that when it gets down into the bass, like dun, 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 dun. You're the first person to dance with me. Thank you. I know this is going to be a lot of fun. I kind of need a moment of fun right now. It's been really intense. First, let's get started. I want to introduce everybody. Part of our continuing series where we talk to reporters, writers, activists, anybody on the left, anybody on the right, a lot of professors, but also a lot of activists. And we're trying to get at how do they see the situation, political polarization here, and could it possibly get better? We want to present their insight directly to you, unedited and unaltered. I think this is our 220th interview in that vein. With us today, David McKerracher. He is the author of Time Energy, Why You Have No Time or Energy, and Theory Underground. David McKerracher is the organizer, founder of Theory Underground, a course-based social media site and app by and for the people who don't belong anywhere, dropouts, blue-collar intellectuals, renegade PMCs. McKerracher's background is in critical theory, political philosophy, existentialism, and phenomenology. I've never heard that word before. His work revolves around a single question: what is the good life? McKerracher's questioning into the conditions of possibly for living the good life led him to a MA thesis on time energy, this existential basis of labor power. This work draws heavily from Marx and Heidegger. McKerracher developed his concept further in his first book called Waypoint: Time Energy, Critical Media Theory and Social Change. His second book, simply titled Time Energy. It requires more robust theory of libidinal economy and ideology. McKerracher has spent the last few years learning Zizekian and Lacanian. I've heard of Lacanian theory of ideology from his compatriot Michael Downs. Theory Underground is McKerracher's vehicle for cultivating the kind of research and conservation necessary to take this project to the next level. Here's the book, Theory Underground. You can pick that up at Amazon.com. A lot of other authors there, but it's about the theory we just heard. There's the book a little bit up close. A lot of authors part of that. We also got the table of contents. The idea of neoliberal university, reflections on a disenfranchised college graduate, the PMC and walls that separate us from them. Don't write like theory academics. That's a good point. Wage labor and
jouissance.
Is that French?
Yeah.
Jouissance. Mikey, for the classroom, how to produce a radical subject, dialectics of a philosophical institution of the common, running in the shadows, vignettes and constellations from the idea of a university, the real of the university, and the Swoletariat's letter to a soft-bodied theory, Dorcas. I know Swoletariat's not a real word, all right? I'm not, you're going to introduce me to new, okay, all right.
It is now, yeah.
Theory Underground, we just covered that. Now you can find him here. This is Theory Underground, I believe, on Facebook. That's what the page looks like. He also has a podcast, Theory Underground. You can find him on Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. The Graphics of Desire, What is Philosophy? Lacan and Deleuze with Terrence Blake of Agent Swarm. The Recovering Anarchist, Why Not Left? One Diamond, Swoletariat on the American Revolution, and Gabriel Rocchio, Sociology, Imminent Critique, and the Conditions of Change, on Emmanuel Levinas, Totality and Infinity. So you can see some really deep philosophical subjects, but I would say made for the blue collar person. But you're doing what I'm trying to do. You're not trying to dumb down the material. You're just trying to make it as accessible as possible, is the impression that I get. And I was impressed with a lot of the titles and the depth that you did. And you introduced me to a few philosophers. You can also find them here. That is I believe that's the YouTube channel. This is where I found the great podcaster, Why Vote, Why Left. We already did an interview with Professor Benjamin Studebaker. That was great. But you've been at this for a little while. You were part of the Secular Student Alliance, I think, in college. And you won a honors class in the philosophy department. So you have been messing around with philosophy for a while. What did I get wrong? Did I get anything wrong? Please correct me on anything I said, any titles, any background, please.
Well, thank you, Marcus. It's really great to be on here. That's quite the perspective for me to see uh, what it must be like for someone just doing a little Googling of my name. I've never really done that myself. And so it's I you what you just found there with me with the dean of the honors college, Andrew Finstuen. That's amazing. I did not know that. I didn't know that was out on the internet. I didn't know you could find that
I
thing.
just did a Google search of your name, bro. Sorry. Yeah,
Oh,
it comes up. I just do deep dive. I keep going. People stop at page 1. I go to page 18.
nice, nice.
So you
Well,
can find those results with like 3 clicks.
cool. Yeah, in the Secular Student Alliance, I was I was the president of a philosophy club at North Idaho College when I was in my undergrad, and I got the philosophy club allied with the Secular Student Alliance so that we could get funding to bring speakers, and then they gave me a little grant to come give a talk. I think that was in Phoenix, Arizona, and I think it was called "How to." Something about world domination, but it was just, some basic how to plan things with people. It was kind of an organizer talk. Yeah.
I organized the debate club 10th grade in high school. And so, yeah, similar backgrounds. Yours is way more advanced.
Well,
Let's get,
the worst thing I do have to clear the record on a couple of things.
please, please.
The main one is, folks, I don't want you to think I have that horrific beard anymore. I don't.
No, he doesn't. This is him now. Very clean shaven,
Yeah.
very respectable, an author, sees podcasting and thinking.
Yeah.
So definitely grown up.
Then I want to point out one other thing, and it's just the difference between Theory Underground and the book Underground Theory, which is kind of the reverse of the title, right? So Underground Theory is the name of a book, but it's also how we understand the theory scene. There's a scene for people like me who come from kind of, families that never went to college, people who are interested in studying theory, people who want to get it, but not through the academy. And there's a lot of professors, amazing professors, for instance, like Todd McGowan of Why Theory podcast. And he takes all of this knowledge he's accumulated and he brings it to his podcast and he shares it over YouTube. And that's amazing for people who are getting into the life, the mind through their earbuds. I think Joe Rogan alone has turned on millions of minds by bringing on various great intellectuals onto his podcast. And so people want to go down those rabbit holes, and there's a variety of people doing this work in the underground theory scene. So the underground theory scene is much larger than me or Theory Underground, but Theory Underground exists to help the underground theory scene. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Cool. That's my main thing.
Yeah, and I get that you got to be clear about that. Real quick here. So this was Todd McGowan is another person, and I think what you're saying is that it's a large industry, and you're not the only person representing the industry. Is that?
Yeah, the scene is very big. There's a lot of people in it, but Theory Underground is its own entity within that scene. Yeah.
Right. So it's not just you. There's a lot of other people participating in this space. I do have a college background, and I was almost going to go into a master's program, but I have ended up in the same place. So I have found that they have over-intellectualized in everything, and they've tried to make everything as academic as possible. And it's been cool since basically the 1990s to say, well, if we start using higher level language and vocabulary words people don't know, that's fine because, they need to step it up to our level or tough. And I thought that was a disgusting thought. I am a big historian. I studied how universities got started. That is not why universities were created. They largely got started in medieval Germany, and it was so that they could educate the public. And then when we built the universities here, it was so that we could do public funding so they could provide information to the public, hence the term professor to profess. And now it's turned into I'm smarter than you, And if you can't follow what we're doing, then you're too damn stupid to follow along. And I just thought that goes against the idea in general, and it goes against the American conception of this, and it goes against why you pay tax dollars, and it's completely not helpful. What is the point of having an isolated conversation amongst a group of priests when the rest of the population can't do it? We saw that with the Catholic Empire. It's stupid and unproductive. So I completely get what you're doing, and I salute you. Ha! At the same time. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I got to have you back on, bro.
Don't get ahead of yourself. We haven't even gotten into it yet.
No, you're right. You're right. And be free. I'm just, most people, I can't joke. And it, yeah. Well, let me first ask you, are you suffering from stress from the election? A lot of people are having post-election related stress. 70% of Americans said they felt it, and Americans feel on edge. How do you feel after the election?
I feel fine, man. I feel
What?
totally fine. Yeah, I'm not. I know I was watching your conversation with Benjamin Studebaker, and you were talking about how you and your mom were watching the TV when January 6th was happening, and you were like, and I was not surprised. Maybe I'm a catastrophizer, or maybe I'm a realist and I've got a better sense for things, but I wasn't surprised when Trump won. I wasn't surprised when January 6th happened. What I am surprised about is how surprised people are. I'm surprised that people are so shocked that there is so much resentment. For me, and maybe it's where I grew up, the resentment is very strong. And as I argue in my piece in the Underground Theory book, uh, it's based in objective conditions. It's a sane, rational reaction to the objective situation, which is something that people should feel resentful about.
Uh, so I want to dive right into that. We'll get to 2024. Obviously, everybody's going to be talking about that. I've talked to a lot of people who were experts in this field.
Yeah.
Not one of them, about 200 professors, not one of them predicted January 6th or saw that happening. How did you know that that was going to happen? Why did you know that this was going to occur? And also, why are you not as shocked that it happened?
So I guess I wouldn't have predicted that they would have rushed the door and tried to break in, or that the FBI would have aided and abetted them or encouraged
We
them to.
don't know that. They just chose to not expose anybody or give us any information or deny that anybody was there. That doesn't mean they're culpable, right?
I have a little rule. It's kind of like Occam's razor. I don't know what we
Mhm.
should call it, but it's just if they won't let us know, then we should assume that they did it. So, you know,
I'm not going to go down conspiracy avenue, but I will point out to everybody it is a fact. The FBI director could neither confirm nor deny there was people there January 6th.
yeah,
The answer is nobody was there.
yeah.
And if you can't say that, mm, okay, I'll leave it there. Not trying to do that,
But
but
just but
that's fine.
to clarify where I'm coming from, though, I just want to say that the not being surprised part, it's not that I would have predicted the storming of the Capitol. It's just that I wasn't surprised in seeing it. And I was like, yeah, of course that happened because people are so angry. So, I mean, it's like the rioting, the looting, the protests over the course of 2020 after George Floyd, right? Like that in the wake of George Floyd, as we say. So it's like, it's not surprising. People have a lot of reasons to be distrustful of all of our institutions, of the experts, of the police, of the government. I mean, I get it. And that's basically what I'm saying.
Fair enough, but why now? Um, People were upset at different other times in politics. We haven't had anybody storm the Capitol since 1812 in America. So obviously, you couldn't have thought, well, this was going to happen 10 years ago, or this was going to happen 5 years ago. What was going on right before January 6th where it seemed like, I guess what I'm getting at is you must have sensed that now's different, that those kind of crazy cataclysmic events could happen in this new environment. When did you start to sense the environment's shifted and now allows those sorts of events? You must have had some feeling before January 6th. Where you're like, things are so crazy. This is the kind of stuff that could happen now. And I'm not surprised. So when did you get that first inkling, and what were you seeing and what were you thinking?
Yeah, so my first inkling was when I was completely uh outside of politics, had never really paid attention to it, and I was on tour with my friends in a band. I was a roadie for them. We were in Seattle, and we were hanging out at a house after one of the concerts, and there was these guys talking politics, and I remember kind of thinking in my head like, "Oh, this sounds really interesting." But I was partying, and so I didn't really have a basis in the conversation or know what was going on. Like, I'd heard a little bit of Ron Paul, and I remember thinking, "Hey, I kind of like that guy." Of course, I didn't know anything, you know. And so what I was seeing there in Seattle was little parts of the Occupy movement. And so Occupy is a bit before my time, even though I was
Mm.
the right age. I was the right age to be a part of it, but I just wasn't. I'd never really tuned in too much to politics. And so I think it kind of starts with Occupy. People started realizing that wealth inequality was extreme, right? And so Occupy is part of that. The Tea Party is the other side of that. So you have two sides that are both uh, uh, arguably regular working class kinds of people being upset with the system. Of course, both sides will say that the other side astroturfed their side of the movement into action. I don't care about that. I think that there's a lot of people on both sides who are regular working class people, and what they're getting tuned into is the extreme wealth inequality. And so I think that was something that both the Tea Party and Occupy were well aware of. Now, I didn't really pay much more attention until I was in college. And then when I'm in college, I'm studying political philosophy. I'm interested in that stuff. And while studying it, I discovered Karl Marx. And I was never really a political Marxist, but what I did find extremely compelling in his work was the way that he focused on labor and how the entire system requires everybody working all the time for less and less money over time, right? So you work more and you get paid less. And I was like, oh, you know what? That's relatable because my parents were working themselves to death. My dad would leave before the sun came up, and he wouldn't get home until after the sun came down. And, he was a wannabe family man, but in reality, he was forced to be a job man. And I think that's a lot of people's experience. And so I was kind of getting tuned into that. Then Bernie comes around, and I liked the cut of his jib. I was like, yeah, this is good. This is exactly what we need, is something that's broad, it's inclusive of just diverse working class perspectives. I'm not saying diverse in the sense of like skin color. Of course, he had that as well. But I'm specifically talking about like this idea where he was trying to talk to most Americans, right? He wasn't just blaming Trump for everything, which is what all the other Democrats have done ever since. Bernie was trying to talk to things that, like, 70 to 80% of Americans wanted Medicare for all. 70 to 80% of Americans wanted that. So he's
Right.
trying to speak in a way that was very uh, we could say popular, which is why people would call it populist. And it included pointing out corruption in the DNC, and the Democrats at large. And I liked that as well because having been in college for a while, I was becoming aware that if you are a white male, there's going to be a lot of people in certain departments or certain clubs. They're just not going to take you seriously because of the color of your skin, which seems kind of racist to me. And I liked how
Mhm.
Bernie's like this progressive guy, and he's trying to say like, look, everyone's got it bad, and we can do things about it. But then what I saw firsthand was that the Democrats did everything in their power to undermine him, and the
What?
the mainstream media collaborated in blocking, censoring him, right? They censored him.
What?
Yeah.
The Democratic Party of America didn't treat Bernie Sanders fairly? Next, you're going to tell me there was a Nevada primary where they literally pushed his operatives out of the way, and that there was another event where they shouted out his people so their votes couldn't be heard. And then finally, I bet you're going to tell me some conspiracy theory about how the Democratic Party had to admit in a federal court in Florida that they had lied to the public the entire time and actually said, we can do whatever we want. We'll tell people we'll have primaries. We'll tell people they have a vote. But actually, we can pick whoever we want and we can totally lie to them and do whatever we want. And that case was on Debbie Wasserman Schultz for the Hillary Clinton trial. They had to admit it in a federal court. You're not going to go down that conspiracy avenue, right?
I don't even have as many of the particulars, I think, as you have potentially printed yourself. No, I did hear you reference these with Benjamin, and I was like, I need to actually read that case. That sounds fascinating. But anybody who was a part of the street team back then in 2016, they'll know that Bernie was wildly popular, but still getting left off of the coverage. Like they would say, they would have like lists of the candidates and the number one slot would just be missing or whatever. Like there was all kinds of weird stuff like that from CNN. And the long story, okay, to cut the long story short, I just want to say it this way. There are objectively difficult situations economically, politically, that have only gotten worse. People feel resentful about that. And then there's going to be certain ways that can be harnessed or channeled. And the opportunity for it to be a sort of universalist, like, hey, we're all in this together. Let's do something about it. The opportunity was there with Bernie, and Democrats did everything they could to undermine that. And so, of course, it went to the right. Populism was on the ballot. And because they did everything they could to stop him and succeeded, the right won that one. And they've been winning ever since. And everything about Donald Trump has been the fault of Democrats ever since. They chose it. They chose Trump. They've been choosing Trump. And the way that they've tried to fight it is always, with gasoline in a sort of sense, because they use elitism, they use fear mongering, they use shaming. They'll say that it's your fault if you didn't vote for their candidate, which they told you have to, vote for, which is you, like Hillary or Kamala, not somebody that was even a runner-up in a lot of cases. Biden was not a very popular candidate, and then they flooded the field and then folded all those guys on Super Tuesday just to undermine Bernie. And it's like, cool. Well, you guys won, but you didn't really win, did you? So.
Oh, I remember that. That was the Iowa primary where the vote counting machines, these are articles to back up what you're saying. Here's what Democratic primary rigged against Bernie. Hillary pushed Trump to make him a candidate. So this is widely acknowledged. I mean, this is published, but I don't know if a lot of liberals know it. But yeah, what was it? The Iowa primary 2020. They had vote counting apps, and the vote counting apps froze the night of the vote. Couldn't tell who won. Bernie won. Found that out 2 weeks later. Pete Buttigieg comes out that night and says, well, I think I won. Pete Buttigieg is promoted by Biden later on. There's no evidence Pete Buttigieg won that. Everybody knew that, but he came out, confused the thing while the apps froze. By the way, those apps were written by staffers by Obama and Clinton. That's not a conspiracy theory, so liberals, please don't call me and go, where'd you, though that is a fact. That was acknowledged by CNN. It's come out, okay? This wasn't just Fox News, Breitbart News. This is a fact. They just said it was just an accident. Yeah, it was Hillary Clinton and Obama staffers. And yeah, the app froze on a key night. And yeah, it denied Bernie his opportunity, but it's just an act. I mean, coincidence. I make mistakes. You make mistakes, right? We all make mistakes. Things happen. That was the official answer. So yeah, that happened too. So, and I'm hearing from people that, to back up what you're saying, I'm hearing some liberals now saying Democrats lost this election because they didn't have the Bernie Sanders coalition. They needed more people on the ground. They needed more people at the rallies. They needed more people knocking. And this was their main hardcore group of go-getters. And they basically demonized them and chased them all out of the party. So when it came time to win a big battle, you You pulled a Stalin right before World War II, where you started executing some of your top generals and got rid of them, and then thought, I'm going to have a great military. And you got your ass beat pretty hard for the first 3 years of World War II until you built up a new officer corps. So that's where they're at. But the difference here is, I don't. Well, you tell me. Do you think the Bernie Sanders people are going to go back to the Democratic Party after everything they've been taught? Trump wins. Oh no. Now I'm a Bernie Sanders supporter, and I realize, man, as mad as I was at the Democratic Party, oh my God, Trump win. I've learned my lesson. I'm going to stop complaining and stop bringing up Bernie and fit into the Democratic Party because that's what's best for America. Do you see that happening to Bernie Sanders supporters?
Marcus, it's a pretty mixed bag. I'm not going to
What?
go back. I'm not going to go back to Democrats, but someone very popular like the political commentator Vosh, right, on his channel. He built his whole, presence online being for Bernie, and then the moment Bernie folded and it was Biden, all of a sudden he was shaming people for not voting for Biden. And so there are people who made their careers riding off the coattails of the Bernie movement, and then as soon as it folded away, they turned into Democrats. And so you do see it, you know. No, but in my case, no, will never go back.
What do you think the percentages are? I know that you're taking a wild guess, but I don't have any other data on this. What do you think the percentages might be on the split for Bernie Sanders supporters who are, you stepped on us, you stepped on us, you stepped on us, you stepped on us. We told you to back Bernie. You ignored us. We said you don't back Bernie. Trump's going to win. Okay, now Trump won. I'm going to ignore all the past misdeeds you did to me. And I'm going to ignore the fact that I was right. And I'm going to ignore the fact that I warned you. And I'm going to say, I don't need to push my Bernie Sanders agenda. I'm going to fall in line as a normal Democratic voter because that's what America needs. And we just saw the end of democracy with Donald Trump. And I have now realized my mistake, and I'm going to fall in line like a loyal Democrat. What percentage between that and other people go, hold on, we told you Bernie was the only one who could beat Trump. You ignored us. Then you stomped on us in 2016, and then you stomped on us in 2020, and then you stomped on us in 2024, and then you lost the election to the worst man ever because you ignored us, you freaking idiots. What's the breakdown between those two philosophies? I'm not a Bernie Sanders supporter, but everyone I know is. Okay, I'm in California. Everybody loves Bernie out here. Everybody.
Well, then what's your problem, Marcus?
I don't trust somebody who I was well, first when he came out, I said they're never going to let this guy near real power. He'd cause actual change. I said that at the beginning when I first 2 years. Then the first year they kind of tricked him, but then he went back and endorsed him. And I go, let me get this right. The leader of your revolution is a guy they can stab in the back, and then he turns around and says, "Thank you, sir. May I have another?" That's your dude. And they're like, well, he had to do what he had to do. And I go, let me get this right. He's going to cause a revolution, upset the system, upset a bunch of billionaires, but he can't stand up to Democratic Party officials, but he's going to cause a revolution amongst billionaires. He has the galls, the cajones, as we say in Latin, to do that, but he backed down the first time Hillary barked, but he's going to go up against billionaires who actually run the country and
Yeah,
have no scruples.
he'll say, "My friend Joe Biden." It's
Yeah.
I'll just say the reason I did not lose some kind of trust or whatever in 2016 with him when he went and did more speeches for Hillary than Hillary did for her own damn self. And that's true, by the way. Was because he said he would. From the beginning of his run, he said that he would if he didn't win. But part of that was because he also said it would be necessary for negotiations so that they could remove the super delegates thing, because he already wasn't going to win without the super delegates on his side in 2016. And so him supporting Hillary was supposed to make it so that they would change the rules of the DNC so the super delegates couldn't block him next time. And
that totally happened, right?
yeah, well, that's no. So
what?
That's what happened.
Hold on. Bernie sacrificed to make a key political move, and he didn't even get what he was moving for?
No.
What?
No.
Why aren't more people backing him?
Well, I think they did change the rules with the super delegates, but what was the crucial moment, though, uh, in my opinion, was that he capitulated to way too much pressure from the activist left, from the professional managerial class, college student to professor pipeline kind of media personnel, activist or advocate kind of pressures like BLM, trans rights, uh, hashtag resistance, hashtag me too. All of those things did damage to his campaign second time around because he capitulated to them too much.
Mm, mm.
You know what I mean? Like those are identitarian issues. Those are identitarian and extremely divisive within the working class. And so he went from being anti-democratic party and saying, "Nope, I'm for things that are good for everybody," to instead like, you know, constantly being like, "Oh yes, no, and this will be good for trans people and oh, this will be good for black people." It's just like, man, just stop capitulating to them and stick to your old message, but he didn't, and he lost states like mine, which is Idaho, you know?
That's also how the Occupy Wall Street movement failed. I guess I'm a little bit older than you. I do remember that. I did meet Micah White. One of the things, but I remember the day that they failed was there was a article in um, the Wall Street Journal or something, and it goes list of demands by Occupy Wall Street, and I go, great, now we're finally going to get into bank reform and making sure everybody knows what the Glass-Steagall Act is, and that Obama didn't actually put it into place, although he said he did, and Obama absolutely lied, and we're still totally uh, able to be tricked like we did in 2008. Most people don't know that. So the protections that were removed for 2008 are still removed, and Obama never fixed them, but acted like he did. So um, when you look at the Glass-Steagall Act and et cetera, so I lost my point.
Well, I no, but I forgot about this. Can you refresh our memory about what happened with the Glass-Steagall Act?
So
What did
Bill
Obama?
Clinton in the 1990s said, I want to help minorities get more homes. Sounds good. And he said, so we need to lower the. So his solution to do that was to lower the criteria to get a home loan. Bad idea.
Right,
Those criteria are there so that the banks don't collapse.
and this
Anyway,
led to that crash in 2008, right?
yeah. So they removed Glass Steagall, not Siegel, Glass Steagall. It's named after two legislators, and those were the guys that basically said you can't. Um, I'm drawing a blank on the details, but it was something like certain types of investment can be in this block, but they can't be in this block. So that there's a isolated realm for super risky investments, and then there's a more secure realm for like blue chip and more secure investments where you're not going to get as much money, but you will get a solid 1% gain. A lot of retirees use that. So what they did was they removed the firewalls between those so that you could now do more risky investment with people's retirement funds. And so then they bet the farm and they lost. But this time, when they lost, they had tied up a lot of secure funds um, from people, and that caused the collapse. The other thing they did was they would take a bunch of home loans to maybe like 100,000 people that weren't very good, and they would sell that to another bank and say, this is a good way, this is a good deal, you're going to get all this money back. So they basically, one bank would lie to another bank to try to push off their problems to them, their liabilities. That bank would not know that they had a sitting time bomb in their thing. And apparently, all the banks were doing this to each other. It turned into a circling fire squad. They're all shooting each other. And then when the first bank collapsed because it had soaked up so many of these bad loan packages, bundles, they all realized that they were had made this bad bet and had a lot of bad loans out there, and so they just started collapsing. Then Barack Obama came in and made sure that the banks were paid off.
Yeah, this is the main part that I was curious about was what Obama had said versus what he had actually done because I think that's where you were going when you
Yeah,
like
I'm sorry. Yeah, Obama said, I'm going to help you. We're going to get out of this. Basically, he did nothing for homeowners. He let them all rot, all lose their money, but he bailed out the banks. And the way that they
Right.
sold that was he and Nancy Pelosi did this together, hardcore. Sorry, liberals. Sorry, that's the way that it went down. Nancy said, "You have to pack this package." And they said, "Well, Nancy, this bill has like 1,000 pages. How do we know what's in it?" And she said, "You know what's in it when you approve it. You can look that up." Nancy Pelosi said, "You will know what's in it when you already approve the legislation." That is, she's the person that said that. She's the one that got it passed without people knowing what they were signing on. That's a fact. That's not conspiracy news. That wasn't just on Fox News. That's a fact. So they pushed this thing through not knowing what it was. And it basically was a bail out the banks and give nothing to the homeowners. And then I think we had, I don't know, the largest transfer of wealth from the middle class to the super wealthy that we had seen since the 1930s. And that was because of Obama and Pelosi. So because the little guys lose their homes. The homes don't, and I had to explain this to my family, and they had trouble getting it. The homes don't disappear once they're not yours. They don't just poof. Someone now owns that. They can lease that, sell it to another person, or etc. So when the home leaves you and goes to them, they now have your money and all the money you put into it or assets. So you have transferred $200,000, $300,000 you've spent over the last 2 decades to the super wealthy who now owns your home as basically, I mean, not directly, but they financially laid it out for the banks to do that. And that was absolutely Nancy Pelosi, who would not tell you what was in the bill at all, forced everybody to sign it. That's a fact. And Obama, who backed it and didn't say anything else. And then Obama went on TV and said, "Well, we tried to get some homes protected." No, you didn't. That was, I'm not trying to get political here, Attorney General Kamala Harris, who did it for California alone because Californians said to do that. And then Obama tried to take that and say, "Well, I was trying to push that." No, you were not, sir. You let the rest of America rot. We in California, as Californians, made sure to take care of ourselves. You did nothing for us, and you did nothing for the country. So that's what happened there. And you were talking about economic impacts. I could see where that. Oh, I Occupy Wall Street. I finally remembered. Sorry for the stream of consciousness.
Yeah,
Occupy Wall
you're
Street.
saying that they rolled out the plan and you were excited to see them do something about this.
Yes, I'm totally blanked. I got all emotional. I remembered in my feelings here.
No, yeah.
So Wall Street Journal lists out their plan. Here's the Occupy Wall Street demands. I'm like, great, we're finally going to get to this. They have occupied all these Wall Streets and key places. Now they've listed their demands. Now the system can see we need to negotiate if you want to have all these public spaces returned. And I open up the paper, and within 5 seconds, I knew the whole movement was going to fail. This is about 2 years before it did. They go, Occupy Wall Street, list of demands, banking reform, no cruelty to animals, LGBTQ people are accepted everywhere, gay marriage is accepted everywhere, climate change is this, no dogs can be kicked anymore, you have to give everybody hugs when you see them. It was 45 things. One had to do with banking reform, one. And then 44 were every other constituency group out there. And they go, you just lost. If you had focused on banking reform, you had the attention of the country. Now you said it's banking reform and these 45 other feel good ideas. That is not what people are upset about. You just diluted the message. Now you're going to lose your backing and you'll fail. And a year and a half later, they completely failed. So, absolutely, you're right.
And you said you met Micah White.
I met Michael White virtually. So I knew an activist, Kayla Moon, and she went to his Disrupture Academy when he wasn't that famous. And or like right after Occupy Wall Street, he lost a little bit of fame, came up with this Disruption Academy somewhere in Oregon. She took the class, introduced me to him. She was trying to get me to do the class or maybe be a professor at that thing because I'd done some disruption in the past. Didn't work out. I hear he's a very sweet man.
Yeah, his book, The End of Protests, was something I think I read a long time ago. But in it, he basically says that he's given up on activism and he thinks that the only real way that we could possibly move forward is spiritual transcendence. And so we basically just have to pray and meditate. I mean, the guy was he was an advertiser guy. Like he was just,
yep.
I don't. It just the more I find out about the people who tend to either take over or organize these movements, the more I'm just like, man, I don't know about that.
I'm. He was an advertiser. He was scared. He wanted to do something. He came up with some picture of a ballerina dancing on top of the Wall Street Bull, I think was his claim to fame and how he got in there.
Mm,
Um, but that's him. So to get to the meat and potatoes, though,
yeah.
you had noticed that the climate was turning in a way that would allow January 6th. And we were talking about that. When do you, and I know this is kind of distant memory, but to the best of your memory, when can you recall going, oh, that's different? Oh, things have changed. Oh, we're now in the place where stuff can pop off now. You mentioned Occupy Wall Street, but this has got to be a lot sooner. There's a big distance between Occupy Wall Street and January 6th.
You're
When
right.
did you get that inkling before January 6th where not necessarily you saw January 6th happening, but you're like, things are different and we're now in this environment where this sort of craziness can happen? What were you seeing and when did you have that thought?
Probably after Trump won and the mainstream media and Democrats started blaming white people, started blaming men, started blaming things like started calling everything white supremacy, started I mean it's just the reaction to Trump's win was worse than anything Trump did. The reaction to Trump winning is actually the thing that most people in my life were afraid of. They weren't afraid of what Trump would do. They were afraid of the blues in their lives having meltdowns. And it's just like it's interesting because when you think that the enemy is Hitler, it justifies anything, right? And that includes uh canceling people, talk, the kinds of things that didn't used to drive people apart. As soon as the person's being called literally Hitler, it gets a little crazy. And I think mainstream media realized they could get rich calling him Hitler when in reality there's a lot of differences between him and Hitler. There's a lot. It's kind of absurd.
So I remember that. I think there was also the time, I think I know what you're talking about. And a key moment in that I think it was when the FBI said now that parent teacher groups were a threat because of the rise in white supremacy. And then when they said that white supremacist domestic militias were a bigger threat than ISIS or Al Qaeda, who could fly planes into buildings. It was these guys that could maybe get 20 dudes in some bulletproof vests to show up at a transgender story time were as big a threat as ISIS and Al Qaeda, according to the FBI. And then later the FBI said, well, now we got to watch out for parent teacher groups. And I'm like, parent teacher groups like the one my mom was in when I was a little kid? That's the top domestic threat. Yep. And they
Yeah.
said that with a straight face. And I was shocked to see
That's
that.
that messaging around the idea that these militias are the most dangerous thing ever is I mean, I can't help but see that as part of the framing and priming for the American public to see anti-terrorism methods that were used abroad used here at home. And so it's all just preparation for them to eventually start just disappearing people, right? I think that this already happened. The National Guard getting called in to shut down protests, like this kind of stuff happens. But uh, ever since the Patriot Act, right, which goes way the hell back, it's been most of my life. The Patriot Act's been a thing. That it makes it so that if they decide that you're a threat to the state, if they go, hey, we feel a little afraid of this person, well, then you don't have any privacy. You don't have any of the normal rights that you would have. And so people are uh, unable, really, I think, to take advantage of the Amendment, right? Um, because they know that if you get marked as a threat, you don't really have any of those rights. So, yeah, it's a terrible. What is this you have up on the screen?
This was the. Let me pull the banner down. Sorry.
Parents at school board meetings were subject to FBI intimidation.
From
Witnesses.
Catholic News Agency. That's not Fox. Just so everybody, here's liberals. What? Don't freak out. Here's another piece of evidence. This is from the New York Times. Just so everybody can follow along. Top law enforcement say the domestic terror threat comes from white supremacists. There it is. No longer Al Qaeda or ISIS who can overthrow entire countries, get hundreds of Americans to join them in a militia, send them anywhere in the world, bring down buildings. It's white supremacists who hold rallies with torches, bigger threat, and it's parent teacher boards. So wasn't
Yeah,
joking. That's where
yeah.
they went. And I think around this time is when you're saying, that's new, that's different. You're accusing these basically germane groups as being the enemies of the state. And then, yeah, January 6th happens. Okay. I could see that. I
You've
could
read
see
this
that.
book? This one, Hate Inc. by Matt Taibbi.
Nance just brought that up. Hate Inc. I've heard of it.
Yeah, Nance, I saw Nance say that, and it was funny because right before you started the interview, I actually grabbed this off the bookshelf over there. So Nance and I are both thinking on the same wavelength here. But Hate Inc. is a book that Taibbi wrote on his Substack over the course of a year, and there's so much good stuff in here. The 10 rules of hate would be worth going over alone. I think you would really dig that chapter. But I just want to really quick point out like this one part in particular. So he's reacting to the person who said that liberal bias is the one topic the network news doesn't cover, and he's saying, yeah, actually, they often won't talk about that. However, there are so many massive stories that the national press ignores on a daily basis. We don't cover child slavery, debt slavery, human rights atrocities, particularly by U.S. client nations, white collar crime, environmental crises involving nuclear or agricultural waste, military contracting corruption, corporate tax evasion, and dozens of other topics. Those are not talked about by the mainstream media. Instead, it's always this stuff where it's like, oh, it's the other side. They're Hitler. Therefore, as long as you keep subscribing to our media service, then you'll know that you're one of the good ones. And also because it's always this, oh no, the other side is the source of all of our problems. Both sides are in collusion with not talking about the whole list of things that I just rattled off. And that whole list of things that I just rattled off being kept under the carpet, so to speak, is why we've had there's a whole generation of boomers in my life who are like, oh yeah, no, things were really pretty great between the 70s and 90s. And it's like, oh yeah, because you were watching media that doesn't cover all of these other things going on, right? So, I mean, things have been bad. Things have always been bad. Things have been especially bad since the U.S. became the world cop, so to speak. You know, we've got boots on
What?
149 countries right now. So,
But the world would end in chaos if we didn't have a base in every country. No? Oh, you're not buying that theory? Oh, okay.
I know I sigh deeply because I'm actually, you know, I don't know that you're wrong. I don't, so I know you're being
Facetious, 100%. Yeah.
I know, but at the same time, I don't know what would happen if the US didn't have boots on the ground in 149 countries, but they can at least stop acting like this is just a country that happens to be the best and start educating the public about the things that it actually is doing in their name.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people don't know we have those bases everywhere, and that there are routine cases of victimization of the local female population in a lot of those bases that you never hear about, never gets back here, including in the place of Okinawa. There's a lot of women of Okinawa who had their lives and mental psychology radically changed because of a Marine who felt like doing what he wanted to do on that base. And that's largely kept under wraps. You never really hear about that. That's why they don't want it in there. And we basically said tough. So stay there and have your female population continue to be terrorized. That's the American stance on Okinawa. So this happens. We do that. Also, what was it? One third or one fourth of all women in the military during the Iraq campaign were raped by fellow American soldiers. I'm not making that up. That's a hard statistic. It was about 25 to 35% of all women in the military during the Iraq war were SA'd by fellow American soldiers. Not well talked about. They tried to suppress the document that came out. Um, I did
It
some interviews with. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, it turns out war and what you're calling grape have always gone hand in hand, and then people want to act like there's just wars versus unjust wars,
Sure.
and it's you're basically saying there's just grape versus unjust grape because the two are inseparable, right? So that's one of those interesting things.
And usually, when there's grape in a war, it's the army against the opposing side, not the army on themselves.
Okay, that's a good point. Yeah.
That's
Well,
radically different.
but also historically there weren't, women in the ranks, right? Except for in extreme situations.
True, true, absolutely.
Somewhere along the way, progressives decided that progress is diversity in the prison guard population, in the CEO population, in the who's killing who on the battlefield population.
Yeah, and the result was a 35% chance of being sexually assaulted for the first time in your life because you wanted to serve your country. And the American military kept that under wraps and did absolutely nothing about it and prosecuted absolutely nobody, and everybody got away with it scot free. And they basically suppressed it. So it probably continues to happen. And all the men who did that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All the men who did that are still in the military or receiving retirement benefits. So people who SA'd a fellow soldier, which is a felony, probably did it a couple times, and have probably been promoted, still work in the military, and receive full benefits because of you, the taxpayer. So just to let you know what your military is. I'm sure I know there's a lot of good people there, but this also happened.
Marcus, I'm getting the sense that you really like the military.
I am very much anti-war and anti-U.S. military empire. However, I have family in every single branch, and I grew up, uncle in the Marine Corps, dad in the Army during NOM, other uncle in the Navy, cousin in the Navy,
Okay.
all branches. But I had an awareness in college because I was always told America does everything right. We're always good. We always do the right thing. So I thought that till I was 19. Then I actually started cracking open a history book and I go, hold on. Ho Chi Minh came to America and said, we want to be a democracy, help us. And we said, tough, we want you to be slaves to the French and we'll kill you to make sure that happened. No one ever told me that. Then you find out about that later. You're like, this isn't good. We denied democracy to these people. Overthrowing Guatemala, overthrowing Iran. None of my pro-military family ever told me those stories. Never happened. In fact, when I told them that, they're like, what? That happened? And then I realized there's this bubble for a lot of military vet families where a lot of people serve with honor and distinction and they deserve honor. But what project are you part of? And what is the end result of that? And I think we're starting to see that with highest rate of suicide ever since the Vietnam Wars, the Iraq War vets. I think it's because they knew what they did was wrong, and they were just told, and they just told deal with it, and it's getting to them. So you won't hear that in the news. Super high suicide rates amongst the American military, especially for those who saw combat in Iraq. Not widely discussed, and that's partly why I don't like the military. Is I like the people who serve, but I'm here in the Central Valley. We have a lot of vets. I grew up as a boy knowing what a NOM vet was, meaning that guy who's spaced out of his gourd and is picking through the trash, but he's wearing his military jacket with the airborne patch and like 2 stars. And you go, isn't that an officer thing? Yeah, but he was in Vietnam. I learned what that meant as a child. So I got to see the results of America's wars that they don't show. And you see these people are ruined for the rest of their life. Day after day, decade after decade, they're gone. And then I also lived through the Iraq War, We had the highest dead high school students returning in body bags for anywhere in America here in the Central Valley. And maybe they were the lucky ones because I've seen the other Iraq war vets and it's the same look as the Vietnam vets. They are staring off into space. These guys are in their 20s, but they're not going to be productive ever for the next 30 to 50 years. They're ruined. It's the same thing. This is what we do. We don't show that in action movies like Rambo and other stuff.
No.
We talk a little bit about it, like, oh, it's tough being in the military. Okay. There's no movie on this guy has a horrible life for 30 to 50 years because you ruined him, and we'll just show you that in detail. Those films don't exist. I got to see that as a boy. They don't show that popularly. Most people don't know what the real costs of war are. I live in a war dumping ground, and
Mm,
it's especially obscene because California was the number one place against the Vietnam War, and it was the number one place against the Iraq War, and yet we had the number one amount of body bags in both wars. So our population's against these wars, and yet we're the number one people who die for them. That's a fact, by the way. So I thought that was unfair. Hey, you guys that don't like our war, get out there and die for it.
it's
And then
crazy.
us people who support the war won't send as many of our children to come back in body bags as you guys. And primarily, it's a lot of minorities coming out of California, and it's a lot of Caucasian people in other conservative states saying, let's go to war, but they're not saying, there's a higher death rate, I think, in the Iraq war for Latin and Black people than there was for whites. So I'm like, I'm just putting all this together and I'm going, that's interesting. Who wants the wars and who fights and dies in them? Not exactly the same people.
Often very different people. Yeah.
So let's get back to this. You said something very interesting about them calling Trump Hitler. I
Right.
interviewed a bunch of professors, political science, and one of the questions I asked them was there's something called existential threat language. And I didn't know about this before. So
Okay.
this is the analysis I give, and they said it was okay. You and I are sitting next to each other. Okay, we're having a barbecue. We see across the street there's another guy. And I tell you, boy, I'd like to go beat that guy up. Man, I'd like to punch him in the face and kick him and shoot him and stab him. And I keep talking about that for hours and days. And then eventually you're like, yeah, let's go do it. And then we go beat that guy up. Maybe hurt him really bad. A lot of people get that. Well, you were talking violently a long time, and you were talking violently, and you were talking violently, and you talked to somebody else violently, and that person stood around the violent language. Of course, eventually you're going to go commit violence. Okay, well established. What I'm seeing in the news now, though, from mainstream media, and I've asked 20 psychologists this, I said, I'm seeing a lot of people in the mainstream media who aren't psychologists, don't have backgrounds in how the human mind works. They're political commentators. And what they're saying is existential threat language does not push people to violence at all, just doesn't work that way. So I can call Trump a Hitler, doesn't mean they're going to come to violence. And the way I put it is, you and I are sitting next to each other, I'm shouting violence hours on, and then you and I commit violence. New scenario. You and I are sitting next to each other. I lean over and I whisper to you, hey. I said I was going to whisper part of this episode. You said I could. Okay.
Yeah.
I go,
Yeah.
hey, see that guy across the street? I'm not saying what you should do, but if he's alive tomorrow, he told me he's going to come into your house and murder your wife, murder your daughter, murder your son, chop off your feet, burn down your home, and then go to your mom's house and chop off her head. Do whatever you want with that information, bro. I got to go sleep. I'll check you later. I'm seeing Democrats come on TV and go, that sort of language would never compel someone to violence. Only violent language like Trump uses compels people to violence. Existential threat language could never compel someone to violence. So when we say this will be the end of democracy, you'll never vote again, you're going to be rounded up, gays will be rounded up in the camps. Yes, they said that. They're going to come and shoot us in the streets. That doesn't compel people to try to shoot a president. Only Trump-style direct violent language does that. And I asked a bunch of professors who had backgrounds in psychology, I go, isn't that interesting that a bunch of people who have no background in how the human mind works are making definitive statements about how the human mind works? What gets
Mhm.
even more interesting is that when I asked these professors of psychology about this, I had to pull teeth to get them to admit that existential threat language was as dangerous as violent language, because I was doing the interviews right after the second or the first assassination attempt, and nobody wanted to be on camera saying that. So I had to pull teeth from people in the psychology field. I remember there was one interview where they go, "Okay, I'll answer this, but first," and then they did a 7-minute thing on Trump's bad, Trump's bad, Trump's bad, Trump's bad, Trump's bad. Okay, now I will answer your question. Yes, technically you're correct. After 7 minutes of explaining how Trump's a horrible monster, then they would answer the question. They were terrified to tell the truth because a presidential shooting just happened. And I thought that was weird that you're experts in this. I'm trying to get to the bottom, and you can't say easily what you've known for decades is truth about how the human mind works. Violent language and existential threat language both compel a human being to violence. Now, it's not a 1-to-1 ratio, but both can do that. And yet we're seeing so many people on the news say, no, no, existential threat language cannot do that. Only Trump does violent language. Only Trump causes violence. Thoughts, feelings. Can existential threat language compel someone to violence? Or can only Trump style violent language do that? Your thoughts?
Well, I think it's clear that either could compel a person to violence. So I want to give you, in fact, I'll just go ahead and say that they're both just as capable of driving someone to violence. But then I would say this though: if let's go back to your example. You know, we're at the barbecue. Every time we see that one neighbor, you're like, oh, what I'd like to do to that guy. That guy's really got it coming. Uh, well, I guess what I want to say is that part of what's going to tip the balance in the favor of people going and actually acting on it is if there's actually something there, right? Like, so for instance, let's say bicycles have been going missing, dogs are turning up dead, essays happening all over the place, and then the person at the barbecue keeps being like, it's him, it is him. You see this picture, you see this picture, you see this picture, and maybe it's made up, and this person, and maybe the person showing you the pictures is actually the culprit. Who knows? What I'm saying though is that when there's actually something going on, it's a lot easier for that language to work. I'm saying that if we lived in times of health and prosperity, it
Sure.
would be very unlikely that existential threat language would be as much of a threat as it actually is today.
Sure.
So we live in bad times, and then Trump comes in, he plays off of the fact that we're living in bad times, and then they try to act like it's all Trump's fault that we're living in bad times. And it's like, yeah, so I see that the existential language, oh, he's Hitler, he's going to take away your democracy. That, of course, that would make someone want to go and shoot him. So I want to give you that 100%, but then also just point it back to, I don't think it's just like, oh, because people say mean things or because people exaggerate or catastrophize. It is also, no, the times for change, they are coming. And I don't know what that
Mm.
means. I don't know what that means exactly, but I mean, we feel it. Something's going to come of it. And I don't think it's just because the media preys off of it, that there's something that they're preying off of. They don't create it out of nothing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, then let's get to the big question of the whole series.
Sweet.
How bad is political polarization today? Before you answer, I've talked to some people and they go, well, Mark, we survived the 1960s. That was violent. It was horrible. We made it. We had a civil war. We survived that too. Everything's going to be fine. Or America's always had a rough and tumble style democracy. This is just the way we do things. Calm down. But a lot of it'll be okay just because there's January 6th and this and that, and someone denying the election of the other guy, and then the next team denying the election of the other guy, and then multiple assassination attempts, and then the Capitol being stormed since 2012 doesn't mean things are coming apart. So, where are you? Is polarization bad today? Should we be saying a big change is coming? Or should we be saying, come on, bro, we went through the 1960s and the Civil War and we survived. Calm down. Everything's a cyclical thing. We'll go up, then we'll come down. It'll work out. Everything will be fine long term. Where are you today?
So before I give my answer, I want to tie this into the Studebaker episode by saying I saw what Benjamin said, and I do think that he's got a point. I disagree with it though. I don't think it goes as far as he might have thought. And so, folks, if you didn't go and see that episode with Benjamin Studebaker on this channel, go check it out. But basically, he said that when people talk a lot about violence, it's actually a way of not doing something. So, and I think that it's kind of like, you know, so do you think that people who go and watch a lot of pornography go and have a lot of real life sex? No, they don't. It's because they're sublimating that in a way that's probably not the best, let's be honest. But the point is that it's sapping all their vital life force off in some other direction so that it doesn't compel them anymore to get out of their house and go and meet people, right? And so I think it's kind of similar when you're on the television set or on the smartphone and you spend a lot of time directing your hatred uh, towards the medium. And so and so this kind of goes with Guy Debord, the the philosopher of the Society of the Spectacle, the 1970s. Yeah, Debord. Nance, you can share about that in the chat if you want to. Nance is into Guy Debord or Guy. I think it might be Guy Debord, but it doesn't matter. It's French. We can just butcher it all we like. We're Americans. We can do what we want. And so basically, yeah, and so basically, Debord is his thesis was that the medium, which was at the time mostly television that he's talking about, saps away people's their drive and their action, and it creates passivity. And then Baudrillard, who's usually just thought of as some kind of a crazy postmodernist, Baudrillard comes along and is going to argue, no, it's not making people passive. It's making people pseudo-active. And so I want to kind of just really set up the difference between passivity and pseudo-activity, because I'm doing the Theory Underground thing, and so I would be remiss to not talk a little theory. So the difference between passivity and pseudo-activity. Passivity is laying there on the couch feeling like you can't actually do anything, and you spend a lot of time being angry at the other side because of what you're watching on your television set. But at the end of the day, are you really going to go out and do anything? No, because you're passive. You've been made passive. You've been robbed of your will and of your ability to go and do anything. But pseudo-activity is more like people who just they're constantly active, but their action doesn't actually cause any of the kinds of change that they think it's going to cause.
Oh, okay. I know. Yes.
And I think those two things drive one another. And so I think we're what we're seeing is a sort of dialectic of passivity and pseudo activity. And so going back to these the Capitol siege, my point would just be that is pseudo activity. You cannot take the levers of power by storming the Capitol. Power doesn't work that way anymore. It used to, but it doesn't work that way now. Power is diffuse, it's rhizomatic, it's spread everywhere, it's not centralized. There is no king whose head you can just chop off and then take the throne. It doesn't work that way. When Lenin stormed the Winter Palace in 1917, once they had the Winter Palace, they had it. Like, the revolution was done. But when you storm the Capitol, nobody's home. There's nothing you can do there. So that's pseudo activity. So pseudo activity is something that is driven by passivity. When the overwhelming mass majority of people are sapped of their vital time and energy and reduced to couch potatoes, and they all lose hope in actually changing anything, some people get really animated and they actually want to go do something, but because they don't have any theory, they go and their action leads to nothing, right? Or at least nothing positive. And so That brings me back to sort of my major theme with everything I do, which is time energy, right? My book is Time Energy, Why You Have No Time or Energy. And the long and short of it is just that this word, time energy, which takes the two words, time and energy, puts them together, drops one of the E's. So it's just like this one word, right? Time energy is a word that's supposed to get at the idea of having both, right? Large energy infused, repeatable blocks of reliable time between us. That's what the definition of time energy is. Large energy infused, repeatable blocks of time reliably between us. The point is nobody has that. And when people don't have that, they're reduced to passivity. Or, so it's either passive consumption or working. And the fact is we spend most of our lives working and then recuperating from work, which is to say resting to get back our energy. But when you don't have time energy, what you have is energy without repeatable and reliable blocks of time. So that's just kind of a frantic kind of energy that can't be really harnessed towards
Oh, okay.
serious development, right? And the opposite would be exhausted time, time without energy, right? Because we all know what that's like. You're exhausted at the end of the long workday. You're exhausted at the end of the work week. And so the reason that we don't have our time energy, our large energy infused repeatable blocks of time reliably between us in communities, right, is because we live in a job centric society. And so capitalism versus socialism, which was the debate of the 20th century, was an argument over how to run a job centric society. But both sides assumed that a society should be job centric. When, if you look back historically, the overwhelming majority of human beings who lived on this earth did not center their lives around their jobs, but considered their lives to be something that took place outside of their jobs. And to that end, tried to restrict economic activity to the best of their ability. And that's why people took slaves. That's why people had servants and peasants or serfs doing things for them, right? It's because you're only really free when you're freed from necessary labor. And so, I mean, that is the 2,500-year-old definition of freedom in the West, going all the way back to the ancient Greeks. And of
Yep.
course, we get sold this idea of freedom that is just freedom to consume however we want to, or to be recognized or represented by some politician. But in reality, true freedom would be having our time energy, which is to say, our large energy infused, repeatable blocks of time reliable between us. But when we don't have that, we're exhausted all the time, and then we are passive. Or we have agitated kinds of energy, but it can't be really directed towards anything in a meaningful way, and then we do pseudo activity.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. So, I, yeah, we had a similar concept activism here in California. We call them practical activists and feel good activists. And we noticed that there were a lot of activists who, if we got out there and protested and I got to yell at the person and cause a stink, good, I'm doing my job. And then there were some of us who said, yeah, but you didn't actually change the system. The problem's still there. The law wasn't changed. The policy wasn't changed. That person wasn't fired. And so for all of our protesting, we didn't actually get the result we wanted. So we need to modify that. And there were other people who, weren't as focused on that. They were like, well, I wanted to fight the good fight. And as long as I'm doing that, we're good. Because I feel like that's me contributing. So I've seen exactly what you're talking about. And I think what you're saying also is that people are so frazzled and so busy and running between this and that they don't have the time or the energy to really focus on something. And so instead of taking the time to think about how to cause real political change, they have this anxious energy and then they're just thrusting it into an activity to feel like they're doing something.
100%. 100%.
And so that's January 6th. And so, okay, it wasn't really, that's not how the system works. You can't just overthrow the government and have it work. But then, they felt like they were doing something. If we're
And Democrats let them think they were doing something by acting terrified and saying it was the worst thing since the Civil War. They encourage it.
There were, I'll just put there were international scholars who said it looked like a coup when compared to other countries. I'll leave it there. We don't have to debate it. I I,
Mhm.
I I think the we're dealing with a larger, more important issue.
Right.
So if Americans are very overworked and they have to work two jobs and there's no way out of that, how do we fix the time energy situation so that we have people who are spending time thinking about how to actually change politics and aren't rushing to low hanging fruit ideas like let's storm the Capitol again? So you're describing situations that cause this problem. Okay, I agree. How does that get fixed given that Americans have, I mean, you're a Bernie Sanders supporter. Um, the dollar value of the American workers only dropped since the late 19, I think, 74. This generation has less wealth than their parents. The last two generations are the first ever that will never see the wealth of their parents, which was a quintessential American value. Highest homelessness going up. We have record high rates of young males who are unemployed and staying at home, not having a family, not being productive. And everything on the horizon just says that that's going to continue. So, how do all those trends get fixed so that we don't have any more January 6th, sir?
Well, outside of getting Benjamin Studebaker to be president, which is just a weird idea in
Yeah,
his head,
right on, right on, right on.
I think maybe he could do something. But no, let's here's what I would do if I was in the position of like God Emperor of the Earth. Here's what I would
Yep,
do.
yep.
Because I like you gave this little like,
Oh,
yeah,
here
if you
you go. I found it. Here's the magic wand.
thank you.
I'm going to give this to you virtually. There you go.
Thank you.
Nice. That was great. That was great.
Turned
You took it. Okay.
black.
Go ahead. That was
That
awesome.
happened. Yeah. So
Um,
I
you
would
can do
wave it
whatever
around.
you want. Yes, you wave it around and go poof, and you can
Yeah.
change America to be whatever you want organizationally, culturally, narrative wise. You fix this. How to get fixed?
So you take all of the engineers and economists, and maybe you have to have different schools of economists go into different corners of the room. I'm not exactly sure how to do this, but like the idea is you take all the people who are engineers and economists and these scientists, right? And you put them into some kind of like Manhattan Project style compound, except you have like three of these compounds. So let's just say compound one, compound two, compound three. And then you tell them to compete against one another. The winners are going to get the Nobel Peace Prize. The losers are going to have to eat nothing but rice and beans for a year. I don't know. I'm not going to be complete Stalin and say to the wall with the losers. But so we incentivize winning between these three compounds. So we're talking Manhattan Project 2.0, and we say, look, time energy is real. We know it's real because it's something all employers presuppose, right? They all assume that you are going to spend the majority of your time energy doing what? Labor power, converting that to labor power, coming into work for them. And so then that you say, look, we know time energy is real. Guys, how can we get it? What would we have to do? Now, I can tell you a couple things that they would do. They would probably say, no more door to door salesmen. All the people who are currently door to door salesmen are actually going to help out on the factory floor doing essential labor. And the essential labor is going to get phased out to the best of our ability using automation. But what can't be done by robots effectively and efficiently and sustainably, that'll be done by people, and that'll be redistributed, and that'll be society's chores. Shitty jobs get redistributed to the best of our ability when they can't be automated out of existence. And then the jobs that are what we would call bullshit jobs, such as the door to door salesman guy, right? Like I did that job once when I was very desperate. It's a terrible job. You're basically trying to get people to go into debt for things that they don't need. And you're trying to use all the tricks of psychology against regular citizens. It's a terrible scam. It should not be allowed. No, I do not need your $4,000 vacuum. Get the fuck off my doorstep. Most people feel this way, but the fact is those people who are forced into that situation, right? If that's the only job that's on Indeed or what have you at the moment, well, they need something, right? And of course, people float ideas like a universal basic income. I've got problems with a lot of the economic assumptions going into a UBI. I've got problems with but you know what? A universal basic goods program, now we're talking. we might be able to do something there. Now, we're not talking about the same thing as cashola, but we're talking about universal basic goods. Now, there might be something that we can do there, but I am officially way out of my expertise. Like I said, if I'm God Emperor of the Earth, I would know better than to make such decisions on my own. I would set up those 3 competing compounds and tell them to get to work.
Okay. That's a clever answer. And I now have to postulate what sort of solutions they would have.
It's a fun game for us to play to try to
Yeah,
gather.
I mean, what if one of the well, we could do a little bit of this. So there's about 16 different solutions that a lot of the people in the academic field have said are the ways to political polarization: remove social media, institute non-competitive primaries, etc. One that grabs my attention a lot is they said, well, you just need to get out there and meet the other side. If hardcore liberal Democrats were having a beer or meeting up with hardcore Republicans, then they'd realize, it's another person. It's not the enemy. And there's some evidence of that. Republicans think that Democrats are worse than they are. So, like, Democrats may 50% support abortion, but Republicans will think it's 90%. Democrats, same thing. 50% may be pro-gun on Republicans, but Democrats will assume it's 99%. So there is an overinflation of how bad the other side is. That's absolutely true. Meeting with them could reduce that. But the problem that I had was that, well, if I can just show you this map. So these are election voting districts since 1992 to 2012. This is based upon a book called The Big Sort by Bill Bishop. He's saying Americans have been sorting themselves into like-minded communities for the last 3 decades. This is a map showing landslide election counties. So red means that Republicans win in the county by 20 percentage points or more. Blue means Democrats win in the county by 20 percentage points or more. So basically, don't even try to run in a red county because you're going to lose by 20 percentage points, which is huge. Same thing. If you're a Republican, don't run in a blue one. You're going to lose by 20 percentage points. Go back to 1992, top left. Half the country is gray, meaning it's competitive. Sometimes they vote for Obama. Sometimes they vote for Trump. Sometimes they vote for McCain. Sometimes they vote for Clinton.
Right.
Then we can go to 96, 2000, 2000. Now we're here at 2012. Almost all the grays completely wiped out. And NPR has found that this trend continues right up to 2024. So it's even worse now in 2024 than 2012. Bill Bishop saying that you have these like-minded communities. We vote red. We vote blue. They've been building this way and becoming stronger over the last 3 decades. How are we supposed to get all these people to commingle again in 2024 back to the way they did it in 1992? Tell me how to save that. Oh, I'm sorry. Here's the wand. I'm going to hand it to you, and then you can take it and then tell me how we're going to solve it.
I don't think we're on the screen right now. They can't.
Oh, sorry.
You got to hand it to me once I'm back on screen. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Now I will hand you the wand, and you will take it. Yeah. Yeah, I'm easily amused, folks. I'm easily amused. Yes, you get it. How are you going to fix that? How are you going to get liberals and conservatives who have been segregating themselves into like-minded communities going back 3 decades and now have done it essentially in every state in the union over a multi-decade process? How are you going to get that unwound and start having conservatives in downtown Texas talking to liberals in New York State and realizing that we're all Americans and need to come together?
Whoa, Marcus, this is way beyond my pay grade.
What?
No, I'm kidding. Actually, so I have a concept I like to think about when I'm thinking about this. There's a couple. So first one is called duopoly, right? So like the idea is that the monopoly on power today is a duopoly. It's like Pepsi versus Coke, right? They need you to see that they are different, but in reality, like a lot of those differences are not the real things that they share in
Mm,
common.
mm.
They don't want you to know about those things that they share in common. For instance, they don't want regular Americans being able to run for office. That would not be possible for them, right? They have a lot of the same corporate sponsors, a lot of the same billionaire sponsors. They have, we could get into like how they're all on board with all of the wars that have been going on, a lot of those secret wars that we're not allowed to know about. We could get into all of that kind of stuff. But what I want to highlight, because I notice, I think I've picked up on a theme of your discourse, and it's a very common thing in America right now to talk about the two sides as though they're the two sides of America. And I think that we are underselling America when we think of Democrats and Republicans as representative of its two sides, because I think that the overwhelming majority of Americans don't vote Democrat or Republican. In fact, they don't vote at all. And they haven't voted for a long time. The overwhelming majority of Americans don't vote. Right? I
I've
remember.
heard of this trend. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like something between 22 and 25% of the country will vote Democrat or Republican on a given year. Obviously, the reason that Kamala lost so bad was not because more people came out for Trump, which is that's not true at all. No, it's just that historically low numbers came out for the Democrats, and that's because you can't keep telling people that, oh, here's your candidate, you didn't get to choose them, you have to like them anyway. That just doesn't work. And there's other reasons, right? There were a lot of people who were upset about Israel Palestine. There's a lot of people that didn't want to show up to vote for Democrats because of that. There's a lot of people who didn't want to show up for a lot of reasons. And I think that kind of political science work, figuring out like what was it that made so many people disenchanted this time around, is important. I think we need to get to the bottom of it. I think gender ideology and critical race theory are probably big parts of it. But setting aside why so few people showed up to vote for Democrats this time around, my point is that the overwhelming majority of Americans weren't going to show up to vote Democrat anyway, and we knew that. We knew
Mm.
that. So when Democrats are going to say that, half the country is against them, it's really important to remind them actually 75% of the country is against you, because the half of the country you think is against you, which is the mega people, they're only 25% of the country. The other, there's 50% of the Americans on average who aren't voting for either side. And then people say, oh, well, then, it's their fault because they didn't vote. And it's like, really? Because I'm pretty sure that not voting is a vote against both sides. I take that to be that the overwhelming majority of Americans are not convinced by either side. They're not. And here's the thing: you might have a person who's liberal or conservative, and they would go vote, but they're too tired, they're working too hard, and they don't believe that voting for their actual values would make a real difference because they have a hard time imagining that these representatives actually represent them. So what do we have here?
That's backing you up. Most Americans are not consistent voters. So a lot of people don't vote all the time. A lot of people aren't voting. I have heard about the rise in non-voters. I'm trying to find that because that is, I have heard that there's a rise in people not voting, and it was beginning to become a real problem. I saw some, U.S. voter turnout has soared, but some measure still trails that of many other countries. So yeah,
I'm
um,
trying to make sense of this. So let's look at this. So this is saying patterns of turnout across 3 national elections, 2018 to 2022. Share of citizens 18 or older in 2018. So only 30% of citizens 18 or older voted. Only 37%. Is that what it's?
I think that's what it's saying. That yeah, when you look at people, yeah, 18 and older who voted in 2018, 2020, and 2022, all three, it's only 37%. So it's
Then
a minority in the country.
30% voted for in none of the 3 elections.
Yeah,
12%.
12%. Yeah. So you 8%, 28, 20. Yeah.
What I was referencing, I got from a Gallup poll back in, I'm citing something from that I saw probably back in 2020. I'm guessing that's when I saw it. I think I might have
I've
referenced
seen what you're
it.
talking about, and you're absolutely right. There's a massive drop in voting, and I totally agree with you that when you don't vote, it is a statement on the system itself. People
Right.
are not happy with either option, and so they're saying, "I don't want to buy into any of it." Colin Kaepernick famously did not vote for Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump when people were upset about how Trump won. They asked him, and he goes, "I thought they were both garbage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why'd you put them both up? That's ridiculous."
Yeah, and Nina Power, one of the friends of the Theory Underground channel, she came on our podcast, Why I Left, to talk about the election results. This was a stream that we did on, I think, the 6th of November, and she said that, yeah, in the UK, but also just in Europe in general, this whole blaming people for not voting or for voting the wrong way, that is not something that they do there so much. It seems to be like an oddly American thing. Uh, and that, to me, gets us to the deeper issue here, which is a breakdown between working people and professional people, and how professional people like to blame working people for not doing the things that they want them to, instead of trying to
Right.
show us a plausible and preferable plan. Just show us a plausible and preferable plan. Like, it's easy to make fun of Trump for having nothing but a concept of a plan. That was a lot of fun, right? But it's very different to say that you got a concept of a plan, and then just literally not have a plausible or preferable plan. And neither side had a plausible or preferable plan to get us our time, energy, or to do anything about many of the crises that are facing us today. And so I kind of want to bring it back to, there's this post-trust era that we are in. We're all part of the post-class fractured mass. I have a whole lecture on my channel on the PCFM, the post-class fractured mass. I think this is something that has to be contended with. And I think that there are serious ways forward for dealing with these issues. My example of the 3 compounds of scientists and engineers, whatever,
Right.
like, that's kind of me playing, but also, for sure, give me all the power in the world, I'll do something like that. But there's also realistic ways forward. But those ways forward will not come so long as the profit motive is the thing running politics, right? Because wealth, or the profit motive is what keeps them focused on the kinds of divisive issues that are eternal problems. They'll never go away. There's nothing we can do about them. It's just going to be a back and forth tug of war forever, right?
Absolutely. Um, but we still haven't figured out how you're going to unglue this segregation of the American population. And then when we're talking about, I heard it called the doom spiral. So the way it works, as it was explained to me, was you're a politician, you say extreme things on TV or camera or in an interview. The news will play that because it gets ratings. People want to see politicians say extreme stuff, so they'll put you on there. They get ratings. Now the news station gets money from advertising because they got more ratings. You're seen on that news station because they blow it up and show it everywhere. And because of that, you now get donors to your campaign because they saw you on TV, and voters. And so you learn as a politician, if I say crazy stuff, I get on TV and then I get donors. And the news learns every time a politician says something crazy, if we show it, we get advertising revenue. And so
Yeah.
because we're in a capitalist system, both of them have the financial benefit to do this. And so the question I've asked people is, how do we stop that, short of telling politicians, I want you to not raise as much money as your competitor, and telling corporations, which are profit based, I want you to not make a profit and drive your company into the ground doing things that aren't profitable? How do we undo this system?
This is
Oh,
kind
I'm
of,
sorry. I'm sorry.
thank you.
Okay, go. Magic
Uh,
solutions. America's waiting on you. Fix it.
so my job is to get people to think and try to research for themselves so we can break down the already falling apart division between those who work and those who think, or those people who do intellectual labor versus those people who do physical labor. I'm a lot more interested in trying to get people to think about these things for themselves. And I don't tend to do policy or, practical politics kinds of stuff. That's a lot more like my co-host Studebaker's approach. And that's kind of why, he's also a theory guy, but he's also very wonkish in this sort of sense. And so,
Yeah,
you
he's
know,
very well educated.
I'm looking to learn from him on a lot of this kind of stuff. I don't know I don't even know where to begin. To me, I don't like, short of a military coup that says, I'm sorry, guys, no more. It's just not going to work the way that you all thought it was going to work. Democrats or Republicans, you're all going to have to take the L. Everybody's going to lose something, but you're all going to win something, and you're all just going to have to deal with it. Outside of something like that, I have a hard time imagining anything really changing anything in the next 100 years. And will that kind of I don't even know that the coup is that realistic, right? Because the military is not a homogenous blob. It's actually internally divided. And so but here's the thing. I think that progressives especially have underestimated great men of history. I think that there could be someone who comes along who's kind of an Alexander the Great. And that person could have the ability to speak to major contingencies across the political spectrum and focus on the kinds of solutions that need to be done and working with the kinds of people who can actually get them done. Right. Like I believe that kind of thing is possible. There's a big problem with messianic sort of optimism, someone will come and save us. But I think as an educator, my job is to try to lay the conditions for when or if such a person is to emerge, that person is able to see beyond the bullshit. So the goal would be so that if that Alexander the Great comes along, then that Alexander is going to be able to, he won't just see this country as, oh, it's the Reds' fault. Oh, it's the Blues' fault. No, instead, he's going to have a much bigger kind of conception of what's going on. That's about all I can do, I think.
So we're hoping for an Abraham Lincoln type figure or something like that to come into the future, but we can't see that person yet. But we're hoping that they will appear in the future. Is that fair?
I mean, and what would make them that individual is that they'd be able to speak to regular people who are across the political spectrum, right? This is why I call myself politically non-binary,
Right.
right?
Right.
I've got my
Right.
conservative side, I've got my
Smart.
liberal side, got my progressive side, I've got my reactionary side, I've got my independent side, And it's just like, I think most people are like that most people are kind of, they've got their different kind of aspects. And and really the silliest thing of all is that conservative and liberal are like the politicization of mommy and daddy energy. Like
Yeah.
mommy is feminine or sorry, liberal is feminine and conservative is masculine coded. This is obvious for anybody who pays attention. And obviously, you need both, right, to have a good home, but you also need both to be a whole human being. You got to be in touch with both sides.
That's brilliant. That's very insightful. I haven't heard somebody say that. If you look at it as mommy and daddy energy, a happy family involves both. It's not just one. You can't just go,
Yeah.
oh, one's better than the other. So, no, they're a dynamic yin yang. They require each other to work well.
No,
Okay.
instead they're both trying to argue and tell you have to choose between one of them. And the daddy's Hitler and mommy is what
Gonna
it's
dress you in dresses or something. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
So I don't. Can I
yeah,
choose neither?
yeah. I would prefer not.
No. This is America. You got to pick.
Yeah.
By the way, I don't want to get distracted, but just for everybody watching, basically nobody else in the modern world does democracy the way America does. Everybody has a multi-party system with tiered voting. So basically, you get 4 or 5 parties in. So everybody's represented and everybody feels they get a voice and everybody has their party in. And then you'll form a coalition government out of 2 or 3 of those parties to get a clear majority and they agree what they're going to do. So what we have is one of or 2 parties. You either win or you absolutely lose everything and you get nothing. The Japanese call this the American winner take all style of democracy. There's maybe like 20 functional democracies, the modern democracies right now. Only 3 do it this way, and 17 don't do it this way and do it the opposite way. Also, when America invaded Iraq and Afghanistan, it set up the parliamentary multi party style and not the American style of democracy at all. Even when we export democracy, we do not push our own version at all. We use the other version, which about 80% of the world does. I always bring that up, going, why do we have these problems? Well, 80% of the modern world doesn't have these issues, and that's because they do a totally different system. It's called multi-party. But when the Democrats crush Bernie Sanders and crush any third party, and then say Jill Stein is a puppet of Russia, it becomes difficult to do that. So, last question for you. I know you're a philosopher. I was asking for poly solutions. By the way, check out Professor Studebaker. Awesome. I hadn't heard somebody put it this way, and I've been thinking a lot about that since he said that, which is also why I do this. I like to constantly challenge my own assumptions. So he put that thought in my head, and I've been questioning that. Final question. How bad is it today, and can it be fixed in a few years? Now, before you answer, I want to picture that you're in an elevator, okay? How old are you, if I may ask?
36.
Okay. You're
Got
talking to a 15-year-old and 3 22-year-olds who just, they're about to become an adult, or they just became an adult and they're super excited to get out there and voting.
yeah.
I want you to tell them how bad America is right now compared to the 1960s or Civil War. And I'm expecting your answer is going to be either it's overblown, we can get through it, or no, there's some real unique bad things going on right now. How do you see it? We'll get through this. We've had tough times before, or there's some unique forms of rot appearing here, and it is a guess that we're going to figure out how to adequately treat that disease.
Can I choose neither of those two answers?
You want the pen? Is that?
Yeah, here we go. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I got
Okay,
it.
now you got it. Now you got it, and you can just whoosh, and everybody's like, "Oh, we do what David McKerracher said."
Well, I have students at the university. I'm a part-time teacher here at Boise State, and
Right on.
yeah, and so that I do have that age range represented in my classroom, and I think that it's a pretty good spectrum of people who are left and right and non-political, right? That's what I observe and kind of can see there, and um, I guess I would say I don't think anything's going to get any better as long as the Democratic Party doesn't have any major realignment. So right now, I think the Republican Party is going through some kind of a realignment, at least at the cultural level, maybe also at the, international policy level. I don't know. But if the Democratic Party doesn't have some kind of a serious come to Jesus moment based on their historic failure that just occurred. And if instead they double down on their losing strategy of blaming the people that they have disenfranchised, then yeah, no, I can't really expect anything different would come from them. But then I would also say I don't really see that alignments within the left or the right parties are necessarily going to bring us the change that we need. I would hope that they do, but I'm also not going to spend my life banking my trust or faith or hopes on any such thing, because I mean they've given us no reason to believe in that. I have about as much hope that people doing local charity work are going to be able to address I don't know, immigration or something like that. It just doesn't make any sense. There's a lot of stuff that has to be done at the larger structural level, uh, and it's almost like what we need is a competent government that can kind of stay out of people's business at the local level, and make the larger structural changes that need to be affected. And I'll give you an example of a kind of policy that could work for Democrats and Republicans right now. And that
Okay.
would be, instead of saying we want more or less immigration, or mass immigration or illegal immigration, instead of that whole debate, what we could have is a push to build new cities along the border. And those cities are places that people would want to live, and that they are actually economically productive places, but they're also centers of educational activity. And so they could be a place where families get to learn the new language, they get to learn new trades, they get to learn about the culture that they're moving into, and they get a sense for the country before they actually move further in. And instead of this, oh, get out, or we'll send you back, or this, oh, come on in and be my exploited wage hand, or a field worker. No, like, let's just assume immigration will continue to rise, and instead of just building a wall, build a place. And I'm not saying it should be a disciplinary sort of re-education camp. I'm saying it should be like like a beautiful university city. You know what I mean? I'm talking about a place where people would get to learn art and play musical instruments and spend time with professors. And then to heal the urban versus rural divide, the teachers who are teaching in these places could often be from small towns across America. People like me who don't want to live in cities, who want to live in small towns. I could be in a hybrid classroom teaching, and I'd have people from South America there in my classroom with people from all across the United States who are just interested in Plato. And we could be talking about Plato's, the Republic, and they'd read the book and they'd have time to talk about it and think about it. I mean, is it really any different to spend so much money on prisons, right? I mean, you might as well build beautiful university cities instead of prisons.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, if we don't have this dynamic leader appear, if we don't have combination solutions, if the political climate continues like it is now, a lot of division, can't come together. Do you think things are going to get better in the next 2, 5, 10 years, or do you see this just because what I'm seeing, your solutions all seem to be aspirational. That's not a criticism, but
No,
a leader can come down. We could make these agreement, okay, but that's kind of like hope for something big to happen in the future, which it could. I'm just asking if those large interventions don't happen in the future, how positive are you about the future of the country?
have you heard that saying, hope for the best, plan for the worst?
Yeah.
Yeah, because that is, I mean, I have that tattooed on my soul. Like, I live that. So when you say that I've got these aspirational ideas, it's like, well, yeah, because I hope for the best, but I am planning for the worst. And so when I say I'm planning for the worst, I don't even educate people in this sort of demographic we were just talking about. I do functionally, but in my mind, I'm preparing myself to educate people who will be 25 and 30 years. I am thinking it's
Mm,
going to take a different
mm,
kind of generation. It's not going to be the
mm,
Zoomers. It's not going to be Gen Alpha. I have no hope in these people. I have no hope in
mm.
those people. I have no hope in my own generation. I have no hope in the baby boomers. I am like, no, we have to be planning for a much longer term intergenerational project. But hey, you know what? If Alexander the Great comes along soon and cleans up house, then fantastic.
So, multi generational project to fix this, and hopefully things don't get cataclysmic before we turn the ship around. Fair
Yeah, exactly.
summary?
Yes.
Okay, last question. I've had some of the most fun I've ever had of any interviews because yeah, you can do the serious and jokey combo like I can. A lot of people can't, but okay, last question. You're not you, you're not me, you're a third person, and you're watching this video and you're going, wow, that was a great show. I learned a lot. But it was a long discussion and they covered a bunch of different subjects. I'm struggling to remember it all, but there was this one thing that the speaker said, and it's 5 days after I've watched this video. And while I'm struggling to remember all the concepts, boy, he said this one thing and I can't get that out of my head days after watching that video. What is that one sticky thought you want this random person you'll never meet to never be able to forget.
I'll let you choose between time energy and the post-class fractured mass. Which one do you think?
Post-class fractured mass. I'm a Marx angle scholar.
Are you really?
I study them. I didn't necessarily say I believe. I'm very much so a lot of people are like, why would you read that? Why would you talk to that person? And I'm like, why not talk to them? Why not read that? Just because I read it, just because I talked to them doesn't mean I believe it. So yeah, I am a scholar. I'm not a follower, but I am a scholar.
Sure. Sure, cool. Yeah, so then the post-class fractured mass, especially if you're interested in class and you've tended to operate under the assumption that it's basically the 99% versus the 1%, if you tend to think in terms of the proletariat versus the bourgeoisie, then you'll want to check out my lecture on the post-class fractured mass, because I used to be of that belief as well, and now I am no longer. I think that there is a much more complicated situation, and so we need new maps.
Okay. Oh, there it is.
You found the? Did you find the?
Close. I'm very. The post-class fractured mass is what escapes political. I'll just show you.
You got it. It should be a YouTube video.
Oh yeah. Okay. So let me see if I can.
Yeah, it should have a picture of the old class system versus now. It says then versus now.
Reading Baudrillard's In the Shadow of Silent Majorities with Nance and Lucas.
No, that ain't the one. Here, let me send it to you. Let me drop it in the chat here. Nance, you should have shared it already. I'm just sleeping on it. No, I'm just joking. All right, let's see. Post class.
Yeah, if you type the link in the private chat, I can look it up right now.
It's got 2,800 views right now.
Wow.
I'm going to go ahead and share it here in your live chat. Your YouTube, the automatic, it might automatically get blocked from coming up in the YouTube live chat because it's a link, but I can also email it to you. But folks, just check out Theory Underground. You'll see it.
Email it to me. I'll pull it up right now.
All right, here, I sent it to you on email just now.
Okay.
Yeah, this was a lecture that I did with my wife, probably about a month ago, and we do lectures like this every month at Theory Underground. We've got a bunch of monthly lectures series going on. We got a whole back catalog of amazing courses, and some of them are real heady stuff. Some of it's real heady stuff, and I don't like you were saying at the beginning of this. We try not to dumb it down. We also try not to assume, that just because you don't want to do this, you're stupid or undeserving.
Exactly. I picked up on that, and I was very attracted to that you guys were trying to do what I think education is all about: educating the mass and getting knowledge out to the widest possible spectrum of people.
Yeah, without diluting it too much. And so we do kind of assume that the person who's getting into it is there for it and is willing to be confused a little bit. And if you don't assume that, well then, there you go.
Yeah. Let me pull off that other banner. 1 second.
Yeah, it should be. I like the thumbnail, but this is not the thumbnail. What people see on the screen right here is not the.
Let me see if I can find the thumbnail. Give me a second here. Sorry.
Nance said, "Thank you, Marcus," and that this was. Thanks, Nance. Also, Daryl thought that my answer about what I would do if I was God Emperor of the Earth, he thought that was a non-answer. Well, Daryl, I'd like to see your answer. I'm pretty sure that was a real answer.
I can find the link. I'm trying to find the thumbnail. I'm having trouble, but that's the show. And Oh, please, please.
I don't want to derail this. It doesn't really matter, folks. But if you look it up on Google Images, post-class fractured mass on Google image search, it does come up.
Okay.
Uh, yeah.
Post class fractured middle class.
Nope, just post-class fractured mass. The professional managerial class, as part of the middle class, is part of the fracturing, but there are other factors like changes in the media environment, time energy stultification, and something that I'll be getting into over the course of 2025, which gets to psychological and ideological gerrymandering, where we use a German word, Gefindlichkeit gerrymandering. That's a whole other thing that I probably can't get into right now, but stay tuned, folks. It's part of.
Yeah, I mean, you're covering some deep dive on deep philosophical questions, and you have the pedigree and the background to do that. And I know that you're focusing on and promoting the fact that it's organic, and that's great. But I think it's still just educational. And is this it?
Yeah, that's like the podcast version of the thumbnail. That'll work.
I'm sorry, man. Sorry.
Yeah.
But this is what the video. If you go to YouTube and you type post-class fractured mass theory underground, post-class fractured mass theory underground on Google or YouTube, this automatically comes up. When you hit the beginning of the button, you'll see that, and before then you'll see a thumbnail for something like this. So for everybody who wants to be able to find it, you can track it down there. What was the insight from that you wanted to showcase for everybody?
It's that the silent majority doesn't vote. I mean, that's I would say, if I have to simplify it, there's a lot more that I could get into, but if we're just going to be very simplistic, the silent majority doesn't vote, but all of the political representatives keep acting like they speak for that silent majority. Ever since Ronald Reagan, they've been acting like they speak for that silent majority, but that silent majority is not the polis, it is not the socius, it is a mass, but the way that Baudrillard talks about the mass of like the earth, like, you lose the charge, it's what drowns out the electrical current and neuters it. So like the mass, it's like it's what refuses to be represented. When people are too exhausted to educate themselves and keep up with what's going on, you end up in a post-trust era. And yes, experts and institutions have rightfully lost the legitimacy that they had worked so hard to gain.
Post-trust era. Wow, yes. Okay. Would you ever be willing to come back on?
Of course.
Okay, great. Because this is just go super deep dive. Like everything, we're like super deep dive, super deep dive, super deep dive. So that's great. We'll leave it there for now. We're under 2 hours. Thank you all for watching. I will send you a copy of the show. I definitely want to have you back on because I'm sure something's going to blow up figuratively, and I hope in the American political landscape, and I'd love to talk to you at that time. We'll end it there. Thank you for coming out, and I'll send you a copy. Oh, and you don't have to name anybody, but we always ask for recommendations. If you know anybody who's thoughtful,
bring Nance on.
Nance?
Yeah, okay. He's in the chat there. He just started podcast. He started his own podcast on Substack pretty recently, but he's been a co-host of mine on Theory Underground for the last year and a half. We've done a lot of stuff together. He's a great guy. Yeah. 10 out of 10. Will recommend.
Could you hook me up on email with him? I'll email you a thing and then email, and Nance will talk. Okay. Yeah. I'll send you an email in a little bit, a copy of the show. And thank you very much. I really appreciate you coming out.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay, take care.